Okay. We already know this picture. I hope everyone is following along what we have been doing into the whole networking track. We are building things piece by piece. And what we did here that we have our networking sorted out, we have subnet sorted, we have route table sorted, we have NACL and security group in place. And now we want to extend it to the next topic. Okay, so next topic is our on-prem network connectivity. We want to go beyond the VPC. How we do that? So let's say this is my on-prem network and I want to connect to on-prem network. What could be the use case? Why somebody would like to do that? Maybe you are doing like a hybrid architecture, right? So you want to run some application, some portion in cloud and remaining portion into AWS. So that's why you would be using a hybrid network, and that's why you would need connectivity. That is one reason. Maybe I'm doing migration. I'm moving my on-prem stuff to cloud, or maybe from cloud to on-prem, whatever it is. So migration could be of data, could be of application. It is purely up to me. Or maybe I am extending my footprint in the sense that I do not have sufficient capacity in on-prem and now I want to use cloud for some capacity need, maybe temporary, maybe permanently. So these are some use cases why I may be using a hybrid connectivity model, and let's see how it is implemented. Now, whenever you want to implement a hybrid connectivity, you would need a gateway. We have talked about few gateways by now. We talked about internet gateway, which allows you to connect to internet. We have a NAT gateway here. NAT gateway allows you to communicate from private network to external network. So that is your NAT gateway. Similarly, when I plan to talk to my on-premises network, I would be needing a gateway also in this particular case. And that gateway is called my virtual private gateway, VGW. So VGW is what I would be needing. And as you see here, a VGW is associated to a VPC same way like I have associated an internet gateway to the VPC. I would go ahead, create a VGW and say, hey, VGW, you would be connected to a specific VPC. And it would be a way for you to go to external on-prem networks, right? Question to you. If I want VGW, do I still need to have internet connectivity? Is internet gateway required for VGW? What do you think? Do you need internet gateway to use a VGW? What is your guess? Do you need that? Yes and no, yes and no. No, we do not. Yes, we do not need that. Maybe we can keep a network which is completely internal. We don't want to expose it at all to internet. So no, it can't be private. Yes, it can be private. So we do not need internet gateway. But probably if you want to keep everything private, then probably you would be using just a VGW. And once you have this VGW, it allows you to create two type of connection to your on-prem. One type of connection we can use is called a direct connect or DX for short. And another type of connect we can have is called VPN connection. So you could utilize both of them or maybe one of them, purely depends on use case what you have. So you may utilize a direct connect or you may utilize a VPN connection to communicate to your on-prem environment. Now, the VPN which I am going to explain here is your site-to-site VPN. What I mean by the site-to-site VPN, I have a cloud site here in a region and I'm connecting the whole site to my on-prem network. That is another site. So this is referred as a site-to-site VPN. VPN connection is slow, isn't it? It depends, I would say. I would talk about that. We will see that how it is slow and how it is fast. So I'll talk about that because what you could have a direct connection in 1 Gbps also, and a VPN gives you 1.25 Gbps. Now tell me which one is fast, which one is slow, right? So I would say these type of questions, slow, fast, are relative. So it depends what I have. So I may have a slower direct connect connection and a faster VPN connection. That can also happen. Yet, but most of the time VPN are limited into the bandwidth they can offer, but there is a way to go around it. We will talk about some of them. Question from Pawan is that in case of direct connect we use direct connect gateway, right? Not always, Pawan. It can be used and it is a better choice, but it is not mandatory to use direct connect gateway. Direct connect gateway is a good use case when you have a application which requires a multi-region connectivity. So right now, if you see this connection is bringing me to only one region. But what if I have to go to multiple region? And that time DX gateway would be a better choice. So we will use DX gateway that time, but not for every use cases. So maybe I'm starting small and I do not need DX gateway. Why I would go for it? So it's not mandatory, but it is good to have if you have a multi-region architectures, right? Hope that answers your question. So these are the two options for me, how I would use a VPN or I would use a direct connect. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Now, I can't explain things without taking an analogy. So let me take an analogy here also to explain you about VPN and on-prem direct connect connectivity. We all board flights, right? Think about a commercial flight. What you have to do in commercial flight, you have to go to airport, wait for your turn to be boarded, buy a ticket, and you get one ticket into a flight. You sit on that, and with along with hundreds of other passengers, you also move from one place to another place. That's what a commercial flight is doing. It is cheaper because the cost of the whole flight is divided into different people, depending on the ticket, depending on how many people are traveling. A flight could be cheaper or costlier, but it is much cheaper than having a private jet. So when you are using a commercial airline to go from point A to point B, basically you are using a site to site VPN in a way, right? It is operating from one specific city to another specific city, or one country to another country, and then you are just using existing flying network, existing airline who operate. You just buy a ticket and go through that. That's what my commercial flight are allowing me to do. But if you could afford, you may go with a private jet, right? In that case, you decide what stopovers you have to make. You decide when you have to take off. You decide which seat I want to get into. You decide that what type of private jet I want, and that is all in your own control. That is a direct connect. That is your private connection going from your environment up to AWS, and only you have control on that. Control in the sense you select what you want to use it for, you select what type of data would go inside it, you select the encryption is needed or not. So that is your private jet. That is your site to site VPN or your direct connect connection. Right. I hope this is a better example. And now I would relate these things and compare it into the different aspect of it. All right. Anyone, any questions on this before I talk about differences between them? I do not have time to explain everything, but I'll at least give you the idea about site-to-site VPN and direct connect and some use cases and some technical differences so you would understand it in a better fashion. Right. So site-to-site VPN and direct connect, what are the use cases for that? So if I want to connect remote network to AWS VPC, which does not require heavy data transfer or does not require a consistent connection. Consistent connection is not needed. Maybe I connect from my on-prem environment to AWS every evening, transfer my data. Once my work is done, I disconnect that. So I do not need a constant connection to AWS. That time, site-to-site VPN is a good choice. Right. When you do not require heavy data transfer or don't require consistent connection, then you can use site to site VPN, because you start when you need that connection, start your VPN. Once your work is there, you tear it down, you end the connection. So that is a good use case. Direct connect is a path which is regular. So connecting remote network to VPC, which require heavy data transfer or require a consistent connection. So if you have to utilize a lot of stuff and send a lot of stuff from your on-prem to cloud or vice versa, then you would use direct connect. Think of it, direct connect gives you a bigger pipe, and a pipe which is always connected, and you do not have to establish that connection. VPN connection you have to establish every time, or you could keep it completely 24 by 7, but direct connect is 24 by 7. Right. At least you pay 24 by 7 whether you use it or not. So that is what my direct connect is. Now, what else? Choose site to site VPN when your cost is important. You don't want to pay a lot of money for data transfer. You have small amount of data to be transferred, and priority is cost, not the performance, not the consistency. That time site to site VPN is a good choice. Direct connect can give you predictable performance because that is your flight, right? So you know your personal flight, your private jet won't be delayed because of some person are missing into the flight. You could decide to take off without them. You could start any early morning flight or whatever. So it is predictable performance. When you have that importance, then you would go for direct connect, because when you are getting a direct connect, you are getting a SLA associated with that service level agreement. So whoever your vendor is will give you, let's say, 1 Gbps connection or a 10 Gbps connection or 100 Gbps connection to get started, and that will give you a predictable performance. So, right? So when performance is important, predictability, consistency is important. That time you would be using a direct connect connection. Next is supported speed. Site-to-site VPN by default support 1.25 Gbps per tunnel. What is tunnel? So let's say this is your AWS endpoint, and you would connect to this AWS endpoint from your own site. So this is your on-prem location. In on-prem location, what you would have some type of device here, probably a router, or I would just call a VPN endpoint as of now. This is where your connection would be established. So this may be a one endpoint. What AWS is doing, you connect to endpoint of AWS, which we call VGW, and AWS create these endpoint for you. These are two endpoint. Though it looks like one VGW, but technically it is having two endpoint associated. One may be into AZA and another into AZB, and then you establish a tunnel like this. So this is what a tunnel would be established between your endpoint. Now, though it looks one connection, behind it, what is happening that there are two tunnels formed. So if I use a different color, so technically it is one connection, but on that there is one tunnel and there is another tunnel formed on that. So these are my tunnel 1 and tunnel 2. Tunnel is the path on which my data would be going. At a time, one tunnel is active in default condition, and one tunnel can give me 1.25 Gbps of traffic. One is active and second is standby. It is not doing anything, but it is waiting. If primary fails, if active fails, it will take over, and then I would be able to transfer data using it. So that's how I would be getting 1.25 Gbps. But in case of direct connect, my speed can be depending on the connection I ask for, 1, 10, 100 Gbps, and some of the service provider even can give you a smaller speed connection if you need to. So they can take a bulk connection from AWS and subdivide that speed and give you, let's say, 50 Mbps connection or 100 Mbps connection. It depends on the service providers, right? So that's how you would be utilizing speeds here. I hope everyone is following along. Now, how it works, site to site VPN establishes a tunnel over existing internet connection. We need a backbone, and that backbone here is in site to site VPN connection is internet. So when I'm saying I have my AWS environment here is on my on-prem, in between we have internet connectivity. So we would be just using this internet as a mechanism of data transfer, like a commercial flight I'm boarding, which is going from a city to another city, and that network already exists. Nobody is starting a flight for myself. There is already flight there. I'm just buying a ticket. So that's exactly same thing. How it works, site to site VPN establishes a tunnel over existing internet connection, whereas direct connect establish a connectivity over a dedicated network, does not use internet. So if your use case is, hey, for security reason or compliance reason, I can't send any data over internet at all, I want to keep everything private, that time I would be using a direct connect. And direct connect, think like this is how your network would be established. You won't be talking to internet at all. Without internet, you would be sending everything. That is your direct connect connection. This one is internet, and then this is your VPN connection. So I hope this thing is clear. Right. If you have any questions, any doubts, put them into chat and I'll look into it. Next is high availability. Site to site VPN are highly available on AWS side. VGW is deployed across 2 AZ. I explained that. And then direct connect is a single connection. There is no high availability by default. When you get a direct connect connection, your service provider gives you one connection. If it breaks, your connectivity would be lost. So you may decide that I may want to use multiple direct connection for high availability, but that effort you have to put, it is not there by default. You won't be using it, right? Right. Similar to on-demand EC2 and reserved, in a way, yes, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Uh, I see one drawback is dependency on public internet line, both and these should be up every time. Yeah, I agree on that. So again, it depends what you are looking for. So yes, that is sorry, give me a minute. I by mistake closed this. Come on. I was trying to click something else and then I ended up clicking something else. So let me come back to this particular slide again. And yes, there are some limitations on high availability of it. So it will depend on what you are looking for in your application. Right. So you decide on what you see. Question is, are the difference in encryption between site-to-site VPN and direct connect? Good question. Anyone wants to answer that? I would obviously answer, but I want to know if somebody has some idea on encryption between site to site and direct connect. That is my next point here. Site to site VPN are encrypted by default. They use IPsec. They will always be encrypted. Everything IPsec would be used in this case. Direct connect is not encrypted, right? Direct connect is a direct connection. Let me give an example, very funny example. So when you are traveling into a commercial flight, right? Though it doesn't happen, but maybe I would keep my suitcase with a lock on that or my bag with a lock because it would go through a public network. But when I'm flying into my private jet, do I have to put a lock on my suitcase? Probably no. Same thing applies here too. So direct connect are not by default encrypted. We expect it is a physically separate connection, so you do not need encryption by default. But if you want, you could establish a VPN on top of Direct Connect for encryption, but encryption is not by default there in Direct Connect. Site to site VPN always use our IPsec connection for this. So just be aware that encryption is differently implemented on that. So it depends on what you're establishing. VPN would always have encryption, whereas your Direct Connect will not be having connection. So question Rashmi is saying that Direct Connect is more secure. I agree on that and do not agree also. I would tell you why. Because see, Direct Connect is expecting that you have a physical security, right? So you are on a physical security. That means that you are connecting things from here to here and nobody is allowed within that path. But it's my data encrypted? Answer is no, right? In VPN, your data is always encrypted, right? Yeah, you want to secure your bag more. I agree on that. So yeah, I agree. So that is one example I wanted to share. So hopefully this thing is clear, right? Let's talk about the next point here, the difference between them. Site to site VPN require very minimum time to set up. You can decide to go for it in a self-service fashion. Whenever you want, you could go ahead and say, hey, I want to establish a site to site VPN. I do not want to go ahead with lengthy procedures of approval and all. I could establish within few minutes my site to site VPN, right? But Direct Connect works with a service provider. I will draw a little whiteboarding thing so that you would know it better. But Direct Connect would always require you to have a service provider, and that service provider would help you to establish your connection. So it may take time, maybe few hours, a few days, probably it would be required before you can get set it up, right? Another difference here is in cost. In a site-to-site VPN, you pay per connection hour and data transfer out. How many hours you keep your connection running, how much time it was connected, and how much data transfer you do, you pay for that. In a direct connect, you pay a variable port fee and data transfer. Variable port fee is basically saying that, hey, if you are using a 1 Gbps connection, cost is different. If you are using 10 Gbps connection, cost is different. So this is a difference between site to site VPN and a direct connect. And I would be giving you the service summary pages of both of them. So go ahead and check that into the resources section. I already uploaded them. So you should be able to get these one pagers of site to site VPN and direct connect here, right? Now let me go to console and show you some of the stuff so that you could relate to what I'm trying to explain you here. Give me a minute. I'm coming back to my console here, and here I would be going to my VPC to establish these settings. Let's go to VPC. If there are any questions, any doubts, put them into chat and we would be happy to answer those questions. So I am on my VPC and I would find a section by which I could perform my virtual private network or VPN connection. I could go ahead and set up. Let's go ahead and see options on that. So VPN has 3 requirements. I'll explain them one by one. There is a need for a customer gateway. There you need a virtual private gateway and you need a site-to-site VPN connection. Better would be that I explain it on a drawing so that you could relate to what I'm saying here. So this is my on-prem environment. This one here is my AWS connection and I want to establish connectivity and I'm assuming everything in between is what my internet is. So I want to leverage a VPN connection. To get started, what components I need? You need 3 things. First thing you need is a VGW on your side. So you would be needing a virtual gateway. You would create this virtual gateway and you would associate it with a VPC. You would create a connection from a VGW to a VPC. So that is the component you would need on AWS side. So you say, I want to create a VGW. You would get a VGW created. You would associate with a VPC. Obviously, in this VPC, you would be creating a routing table entry for this data transfer to happen. But this VGW is your Amazon side of network. Now, next thing here is on-prem. What you need on on-prem? On-prem, you would be needing a physical device or a software device which would become your VPN connection endpoint. So I would be needing here a VPN endpoint. You could decide what you want to use for this VPN endpoint. Do you want to use a hardware based devices or do you want to use a software based device or a software running on a EC2 machine? It is purely up to you what you decide on how it works. So you decide on that. So you would need that physical component on your side. So this one would have a public IP address. Right. So this is on your side. It is maintained by client. It is a on-prem environment, so you would maintain it. Now, what you have to do, you have to create a link to that, and for that we create here something called a CGW. Now this confuses a lot of people. CGW stand for customer gateway. What a customer gateway is? Customer gateway is a logical representation of customer device. Logical representation of a customer end of VPN connection. This is a representation. What I mean by that, that you would be creating the physical VGW on the customer side. Sorry, physical VPN endpoint on the customer side. On AWS, you would say how I want to talk to it. So I would be needing a IP address for that. So once I have a VGW setup, this is what I would create CGW, I would just point to it. And once this is ready, on top of it, what we are going to do, we are now going to establish a VPN connection. So 3 components are required. First, you would need to set up a VGW. You need to set up a pointer to CGW on the customer side. And once both are there, you would combine both of them into a VPN connection. And that's how you would be establishing the connectivity. On-prem, do we have route table too? Answer is yes. Nothing works without route table. So whatever you are doing, route table always needs to be there. Route table would always be needed. Without it, route table, nothing would work for you. So yes, you would be needing route table also. Right. There was a question on transit gateway. We will talk about transit gateway into coming sections. So we will talk about that. What is the IPsec tunnel? Next question here. IPsec tunnel is a way where we encrypt the data when it is going. So physical connection is there, and then we create like a safe passage between these two. And whatever we send before we put encryption on top of it here, and we decrypt it here before handing it back to it. So IPsec tunnel is like a wrapper around whatever data you are sending. So let's say I am sending somebody a package. Now, I don't want to keep it into a transparent box so that everyone can see what is inside. So what I would do, I would put that into a other box which will hide the content of it. That is in a way is a IPsec tunnel. So whatever data you send, it would put an encryption on top of it, send it to the next point, remove the encryption and deliver data back. That's what we have. Right. So we will use IPsec tunnel. Right. Yes, it is on CGW by default, Sunandam, but you can create CGW, create tunnels on your Direct Connect also by establishing VPN on top of it, right? So, so what I would be doing here if I have to connect, I have to connect through a customer gateway. Give me a minute. So I'm having here a customer gateway. Customer gateway is what we connect to. We just establish a customer gateway and say, hey, what is your IP address of customer gateway? And I would be utilizing that connectivity there. Right. So customer gateway, I do not create, I point to, though it looks creation, but what I'm doing here, I am just providing the IP address of my customer endpoint. And once I have, I would be able to establish connectivity on that. So customer gateway is you connect to, and VGW is what you create. So here I am on my VGW and I would be able to create a VGW there. Right, so I am again on my VPN gateways, and here I would be creating a VPN, virtual private gateway. And once this virtual private gateway is ready, see this, I'm connecting it to a VPC once it is created. Right now I have to just say I want to create it, done, give it a name. Once it is created, associate with the VPC. And once both your CGW and VGW are ready, then you would connect them into a site to site connection, and that would establish your VPN. So when I'm saying I want to establish a site to site VPN, let's see what we provide information on that. So when a VPN connection is needed, we will say I want to create a VPN. I would say which is my virtual private gateway and to which customer gateway I want to connect. And once this is ready, I should have no problem in accessing these services, right? So I hope this thing is clear and you get a better idea on that. And see this two tunnels. So this will be tunnels created on top of it. That's what we would be utilizing it, right? So tunnel is an overlap on top of existing underlay physical network. Exactly, that is true. So the tunnel is something which is establishing on that. What is BGP peering, which is part of CGW? BGP is a protocol which is used by these routers to communicate and share information. So broader gateway protocol is a way the or the language which this router speak to explain others about what network they are connected to and how to route to them, what are the best path available. So uh, it's like some, let's say, sometimes what you will find that on a highway when you are driving, some drivers will tell you that hey, there is a police check or there is a camera, so be aware about that. That the language of a driver's communication, that the same way routers communicate to with each other to tell whether they are connected to a network, how to route to that, what is the best part to reach, and that language of communication is called BGP. It is a protocol which you may use for communication, right? Another question, can we practice both S2S VPN and DC on a AWS account? Ranga, S2S is much easier to practice. VPN, sorry, site to site VPN can be easily established, but for direct connect, answer is no. You would have to establish it by talking to a service provider. I would draw some detail and it will tell you that you may not be able to practice direct connect. Why? Because it requires a third party to establish a physical connectivity to your environment, right? So site to site VPN, yes, you can, and there are a lot of options available. You can use OpenSWAN VPN plus AWS. So this is a software. Install this on a EC2 machine or on your on-prem environment, and through that you should be able to communicate to AWS. So these softwares are there, but Direct Connect is a physical component, so you won't be able to practice it unless you are willing to spend that much of money. Right. What happens if a company want to terminate their direct connect? Is there a protocol on how they must do it? See, it depends on which service provider you are connecting to. Right. So let me draw that and it will be much easier for you to relate all these questions related to direct connect. Let me go to direct connect first and tell you how we would get started. So when you want to establish a direct connect, you need to select a physical location which is near to you. And then you would say, I want to create a connection. right? So here I am creating a connection, and in that I would select what my requirement are. Let me keep it simple. Let's say I'm using it for development and test. What I would have to do, I have to go through a physical location and see this. These are physical locations all over the world where we have a direct connect setting available or direct connects available. So if I'm in London, I would be selecting something which is in London. So if I want to establish a direct connect to AWS London region, probably I would be connecting to these companies like Digital Realty or maybe Telehouse, and they would give me the connectivity. Let me draw it, and it would be much easier for you to understand. So this is your AWS environment. You want to connect to it, and this one is your on-prem environment. What you want a physical connection. AWS doesn't have physical connectivity up to your building, but a service provider, let's say British Telecom or something else, they would have a connectivity up to your premises. So what you could do, you could go ahead and select a DX partner, direct connect partner, like we just saw the name of Telenor or other companies, British Telecom, AT&T, maybe Equinox. These are all the companies who are direct connect partners. What these direct partners are, what AWS has done, AWS has capped a rack of network equipment in their physical premises that we call AWS cage. So that is referred as AWS cage. Cage is just a name. It is basically a networking rack which has a connectivity from it up to AWS directly. So this physical connectivity we have already established up to a DX location. And now you say, okay, I want to use Telenor or maybe Equinix or British Telecom as my DX partner. So what this service provider would do, this service provider would create a physical connectivity up to your on-prem. So there is a physical connectivity required for direct connect to work, and that physical connectivity would be coming to their rack in the same location where your AWS connection is there, where AWS cage is. So this is my DX partner cage or my communication partners cage or a networking rack. So that physical path has to be provided by your DX partner. So that's why you would have to talk to them, and then you will decide what is the nearby location, and then you would establish a connectivity there. Once this physically is sorted out, you would raise a request first to AWS. So how the process works, if you need a direct connect request, you would raise a request to AWS and say, I want to connect to this physical location through this DX partner. All right. AWS will inform that partner, and that partner will then communicate to you and then establish the physical connectivity. Once this physical connectivity is ready, what we would allow a communication from this to this rack. Get the idea? So we would have a connectivity from this rack to AWS rack, and now these two ports are physically connected. Basically, it is like a link which we establish from our networking rack up to DX partner rack, in which your connections are terminating. And once this established, you get a full physical path to communicate from you up to AWS. So this is what happens in case of direct connect connectivity. There is a part which has to be taken care by your DX partner. They would establish the physical connectivity, and once this is done, you would be able to send traffic out. So that's why there would be a cost associated with all the process of direct connect, because otherwise, why they would establish a physical connectivity to you. I hope everyone is following along and getting the idea of how DX actually works, right? So any questions on this, any doubts, any confusions? I hope everyone is following along. And as there is a physical component required, there would be cost associated. And then this DX partner can decide what speed they can offer, 1 Gbps or 10 Gbps or even 100 Gbps. So it will all depend on which partner you are trying to work with. So if I go ahead here, so if I'm selecting Digital Realty, they are having only 1 and 10 Gbps connection speed. Let me check with, let's say, this one is here in US West 2, and this one will connect me to Miami and Equinox, and Equinox in Miami gives me 1, 10, and 100 Gbps connection. So it depends. DX partner also has a route table. Obviously, they would have, see, route table is always required whenever a network is involved. Anytime you are trying to communicate, route tables are always there. But what happens that they would take care of routing table on their physical routers. You would take care of routing table entries on your side, but everything requires a route table. Without route table, there is no communication at all. Right. Route table is a Google map. Unless you know how to go, you won't be able to see how these communications are there. So you would always be needing in that. When you connect with DX partner, you can connect to any DX partner in the world. I would say it depends, right? So if you have a lot of money and they are happy to give you connection at that location, why not? Right? But what if I am a, let's say I select a partner Equinix, which is in Miami, and say, hey, I want to connect it from my London office. They would say, okay, we would establish, but that would charge you a lot of money. You get the point? So because they are dedicating a physical connection for you, it may be too much money which you may have to pay for that line which is only for you. So it won't make sense. Technically, Equinox may give you if you are paying huge amount of money. Otherwise, you would not be you would be looking for something which is near to you, right? So same example of a flight. Let's take an example. So I live in a place in India which is called Indore, right? So I belong to that place, and if I have to come to London, I do not have a flight. What I have to do, I have to catch a flight either to Mumbai, or I catch a flight to Delhi in India, or from Indore I can catch a flight to Dubai, and from there we have a direct flight to Heathrow. You get the point? Right? So similarly, what would happen that if I want to fly directly to from Indore, maybe it is, but that would be costing me too much money, that the cost would be much higher. That's why it would matter to have a direct connect partner which is local to you, and then only you would be able to access it in efficient way. Same like you have a internet service. So let's say I'm using internet of Virgin, but in your location it could be a different service provider. So you may need to be working with the local provider within your location. All right. I hope that makes sense and you have a better idea on what it is. And yes, direct connect partner location matters because that is what you would be paying for getting that connection established for you. So I'll stop here. I already have taken 5 minutes from Jamila's time, but I hope you have learned something new and have a better idea on Direct Connect. Hopefully, you have enjoyed and learned something. And we'll be sharing all these resources, all the details we have shared on the resources page would be available there. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I'll hand it over to Jamila now so that she can walk you through the process of AWS IAM and tell you about other stuff associated with the establishment of the user identities. And from next session onward, we will try to align the hands-on with the track and maybe reshuffling the networking track and technical track so that you would have a better understanding. Jamila, are you there? I can't see you on the camera. Give us a minute, everyone. Let it be here. Let her be here, and we will get started. Uh, Give me a minute. Let me ping her separately on a different channel. I can see she is into the stream, but somehow might be a camera not working or something else. Give me a minute. I would try to establish a contact with her. Okay, give me a minute. So check out while we are waiting for her, check out the training I shared. So check the link on Udemy, and if you like it, please give ratings and let me know any feedback you have. If you like it, share with your friends, family, and they can also learn it. Again, I said that there is a limitation of 2 hours on free training on Udemy, so I can't go beyond it. So my plan is initially to cover the basics first, and then I may create some training which are focused on certification itself. So we will then see that.